Hello and welcome to API Management Instance Part 2. In the previous the previous video, we created the API Management Instance, we configured it, and we tested it with internal customers. They were able to reach external and internal APIs internally, but no access was allowed externally. So in this video, we're going to provision an app gateway and configure it to allow external customers to reach the development portal and to reach certain APIs that we want to expose to the outside. We're going to call them external APIs. However, any connections to internal APIs will be dropped. So let's get to it. So the first thing we need to do is to create a public IP address for the app gateway to use. So we will go to create resource, public IP address, create. Make sure it's the standard, not basic. Name it. And pick a resource group or create one if you don't have one. Choose the location. There's no need for a lab IP to be in a zone redundant, so I'm going to pick no zone and simply click create. The next thing is to create the application gateway itself. So create resource, application gateway, create. This is your subscription. You're going to pick a resource group that you can put it on, put it in. This is the app gateway name. The region, in my case, it's East US. For this lab work, we're not going to enable auto scaling. For production, it's a good idea. The instance count, we're going to have it at 1 for this lab. No availability zones. For the virtual network, we already have a virtual network that I'm going to put it in. And this needs to be in a different subnet than the one we created the application the API instance in. So I'm going to put it in a different subnet. Next, we're going to choose the public IP address that we created. Next, we're going to create the backend. So we will be creating 3 backend pools. One for the portal, the developer portal, one for the gateway itself, and one we're going to call sync pool. The sync pool is basically the default. Every time an external user tries to access anything but an external API, they would be routed to the sync pool, which would drop the traffic. So we will call this gateway pool, and we would give it the target name. You can go with the IP address. In my case, I'm just for so I can know what target pool is. I'm gonna call it the FQDN, which is my AP Management Gateway, FQDN. So this is the first one. The next one is the portal. It's also portal.mydomain. And a third one, which is very important, we're going to call this the sync pool. And we will just basically leave it without a target, and we'll click add. Next, we will go to configurations. So the first rule we're going to add is for the developer portal. If you're not exposing your developer portal, you do not need to add a routing rule for it. But usually people do expose it. So I'm going to call this portal rule. I'm going to give it a priority of 10. Of course, I'm going to use HTTPS. For the listener, I'm going to call this the portal listener. You can name it whatever you want, whatever suits your business need. The front IP address is the public IP address that we created for the app gateway. Again, protocol is HTTPS. Now here, we already have for the portal, we have an SSL certificate that we already used on the API management, and we're going to use it here again. So I'm going to call it the portal cert. And I'm going to pick the file that has the PFX SSL certificate. I'm going to enter the password for the SSL certificate. I'm going to keep it at basic. This is for the portal. It's going to be a basic rule. And then we go to backend targets. The backend pool, we already created one here when we were doing it. And now we need to add backend settings. So we will click on add new. We will call it portal settings HTTPS. I'm going to select the same certificate. So here we will be adding the trusted root certificate. And the trusted root certificate is basically yourdomain.com. So in my case, it's mydomain.com. It's not the portal or the gateway. Remember, we had 3 certificates. One with DNS name, portal.domain.com. One is the name of the API instance, .domain.com. And the third one is the domain itself.com. And that's what we're going to add here. Now, if you notice, the extension of the certificate is .cer. That's what they need. I'm going to keep the this at the default, the cookie-based affinity disabled. I will override the new host name here and give it the name that I gave my portal. And I'm going to click add. Now I'm going to add another routing rule. That's for the gateway itself. Call it gateway rule. I'm going to give it priority 20. The listener name is gateway listener. Again, the same public IP address for the app gateway, HTTPS. Now this time we will be using multi-site because we're going to configure of them. One is the sync pool that we talked about, which would block anything going for internal APIs, and one for the external APIs. So we have to pick multi-site. Now we're going to upload the certificate for the gateway. And again, this is the PFX, which is the the name of your gateway. In my case, it's focus api.mydomain.com, and you would choose your certificate. If it's a wildcard certificate, it would be a lot easier. You would just pick it and install it on each one the same way. We add the password for the SSL certificate, PFX, the PFX certificate. Now for the host name, I'm going to add the host name that points to my API gateway. And I'm going to click add. But before I click add, actually, we need to configure the backend targets. So the backend pool, we already have created one. So we're going to start with the sync pool. Again, the sync pool is going to block anything. So by default, anything that comes from outside is going to get blocked unless it has the /external in our case. For backend settings, we're going to add new backend settings, HTTPS, and we're going to call this gateway backend settings. You can call it whatever suits your business needs. Again, this is the CER format of the domain name, which is just like earlier. It's your domain.com, the root domain. If it's a wildcard certificate, you can upload the same certificate. Otherwise, this would be the third certificate, which is the wildcard. Again, the same way, we're going to override the host name here. And we're going to let it pick the host name from backend target. Well, this is the gateway. That's it. And then we click on add. So now our routing rule basically blocks everything, and we need to tell it now, unless it has external in the URL, you need to block it. So we need to add a pass rule right now to allow this. So we will click on add multiple targets to create a path-based rule. Here, we simply will say anything that comes in with /external /star, meaning anything that comes after the star. So our target is /external /something. And the target name is basically the word external. The backend settings, we're gonna pick the gateway settings. And the target, we're gonna pick the gateway that we created earlier. So what that's saying is basically anything that has external, let it pass. Otherwise, block it. And we click add. Now that we created the listener, we're gonna simply click add here. Next, we will go to tags. We're not gonna add tags in this here in this video. Review and create. And you would hit create. I already created the app gateway. I'm not gonna go through it again, but that's how you would do it. So I'm gonna exit out and open the gateway that I already configured, which has the same configurations as this one. Now, one thing I did not mention here is at the beginning, at the basics, is the tier. In production, you would choose WAF v2. This is basically the ultimate. It would protect your app gateway from hackers and SQL injections and stuff like that. But for this lab, I'm just going to keep it as standard. At this point, your app gateway is provisioned and ready. You need to configure external DNS records to point to your app gateway. So you would, if your external DNS records are hosted in GoDaddy or such, you would basically go and create one DNS record for the portal, which is portal.yourdomain.com, an A record, and point it to this IP address, which is the external IP of the app gateway. The other DNS record, which is also an A record, it's going to be your instance, your API management instance name, which is in my case. Let's take a look at them here. So one is going to point to the developer.yourdomain.com for the IP forwarding to the IP address of the app gateway. The second one is the gateway URL, and that's going to be it. And the third one is the management. And the management URL is basically the same thing, management.yourdomain.com or whatever your domain is. We added it in the first video here. If you look at custom domains here, we added the management here. So that's the host name for me. It depends on what you called it. Once you added the DNS records at this point, if you go and test out the app gateway, it should work. But before we do that, maybe it's a good idea to create health probes to make sure our app gateway is reaching the backend pools and everything is healthy. The way we do that is we go inside the app gateway, scroll down to backend health or health probes and add. Once you click on add, we're going to create two health probes, one for the portal and one for the gateway itself. For the portal, I'm going to open it and you can look at it. So that's how you add it. This is the host name, which is in my case developer.mydomain at https. Now, because when you go to the portal from outside, you're going to reach it /sign-in. So we're putting the path as sign-in, the backend setting that we already created, and we basically add it. And one for the gateway itself. Now this is very important to put this exactly as is. This is from Microsoft, and that's the path they want you to use in order to check for it. The host name is my API management instance, and the backend settings, which we already created. So now let's test our API gateway and see if we can reach it. Also, let's test the APIs. So this is the developer portal. If I wanna reach it, I simply have now DNS pointing to my app gateway IP address. And if I wanna try to open it, as you can see, I'm reaching it from outside, and it's being secured by the SSL certificate. Of course, as we said in the previous videos, you need to customize your developer portal, but we're reaching it from outside right now. Now, if we want to test the APIs, I do have the Demo Conference API that I got from Microsoft. It's a free API for testing. And what I did in the settings, I added external. So this API has the /external that we added to the rule earlier, the one we added. I removed the subscription required for easier testing, and I have Postman. So if I want to test this API right now, I'm going to open Postman. And I'm going to basically put the API with the external here and send. And I'm setting outside Azure. I'm going through actually now through the app gateway. So if I ping this IP address, it would be the external IP address of my app gateway. And as you can see, I'm getting the 200 OK. Now let's say I want to reach the other API, which is the internal API. So this is the internal API. If you remember, we tested it in the first video. And under settings, we added the word internal. So if I want to test this one, let's copy it This is a slash resource. So we go to Postman. We paste this API slash resource. And again, I'm staying outside. Send, and it gives the bad gateway. So this is hitting the sync pool right now. Anything that does not have external is going to be dropped. So now we basically secured it according to the topology. So now I'm going to test out the APIs internally from my Azure machine that I have. And again, the API, which is internal. If I go to Postman, it's already here. If I test, as you can see, it's 200 okay. If I go to the external API, speakers. So if I go to the external API now on Postman, and click send. Oops. Speakers maybe. As you can see, it's 200 okay. So I'm reaching both APIs, internal and external, from inside, and from outside, I'm only reaching the external ones. So now, according to our topology, we tested the internal customer who was able to reach internal and external APIs directly connecting to the API Management Gateway. Our external customer reached the App Gateway, was directed to external APIs. Anything else that went to internal was dropped. That's it. This is how you secure it in an internal mode. If you have any questions, please leave your comments. And please support this channel by liking and subscribing. And see you in a different video. Have a good day.